Hey everybody, this is Lynn with Kansas Troubles again. This week we're going to talk about the Evergreen trees. It is block number 4 in a vintage Christmas sampler quilt-along. Um, it is simple, connecting corners. All of these green strips I call the limb strips. So the small trees have 3 limbs. You're going to draw your line diagonally across on your D green, tan background squares, stitch on the line, flip to the corner to test your corner. Then we're going to trim our seam allowance at 1/4 of an inch, press your seam open, and then we can add the side pieces. Now, if you'll notice in your pattern, I had a question on D under the tall trees. There's a little typo there. I don't know what happened to my square, but it should be 36 2-inch squares. So make a note of that, please. After we get each strip done with our connecting corners on each one of the limbs and add our side pieces, then we can add the tree trunk at the bottom and the strip at the top. You'll make 2 8.5-inch square short trees. Now, you'll notice I have brown as my tree trunk. I just grabbed my brown scraps from my stash because there is not a brown in the Christmas fabric. So if you choose to do that and you have some brown, go for it. I just thought it made it a little more realistic, and I've been trying to switch up and do my tree scrappier than just out of 2 fabrics. 2 of the greens from the Christmas fabric, and I just pulled from my stash for those as well. Anytime I'm making a quilt the second time, it's really hard for me to make it exactly the same as the first one, so bear with me here. For the tall trees, there are 5 limb strips, and we start at the top. You do your connecting corners on each side of each of the limbs, and then add the corresponding tan background strips to the sides. We have a tall tree trunk there and a strip across the top. Now, if you're having trouble getting your blocks to be 8.5 inches square, if they end up being squattier and shorter, I would wait to cut this top strip for any of your trees, because then when you measure the limb part, if with the 1.5-inch strip at the top, you're not going to quite get there to the 8.5, simply cut that strip wider. Make it 1 3/4 inches. And I think you'll find then that once you're pressed and everything's good, you can trim that off to the exact size you need, and it'll never be noticed in the quilt at all. That being said, I did cut the strip for the tall tree 1 3/4 inches. Those were the ones of mine that with more seams in it, I ended up, not quite 1/8 of an inch, but it sure gave me some breathing room to add a little bit wider strip at the top. So we're going to make 2 tall trees that are 8.5 wide by 10.5 tall, and then the third one is actually going to have a 3.5-inch strip at the top instead of a 1.5. So your tallest tree, so to speak, will be 8.5 by 12.5. So at the top of the page it says make 3 of them 8.5 by 10.5, but you'll see later in the instructions go by that where you actually put that 3.5-inch at the top, because you'll need it instead of doing a 10.5 tall one and then adding another strip once you get to assembling the quilt. That just makes it cleaner and easier. The other thing I wanted to point out was that under the short trees, B1, you only need 4. You don't need 6. So make that little correction and you should be good to go. So there you have our evergreen trees for block 4 of a vintage Christmas sampler. Continue to show your blocks. I am getting a big kick out of seeing all of the great progress you ladies are making, and can't wait to see what you have coming up next week. We have candy canes. I know some of you have already done the candy canes. If you have any comments or suggestions, please post them this week before I go live, and I can address those. Thanks, ladies. Have a fabulous 4th of July weekend.